historical African-American discourse about the meaning of freedom and American citizenship. My book is about the historical quest of African Americans for freedom and full citizenship in Grand Rapids, the Furniture City. This story is about ordinary people who were racially stigmatized, who labored in the unglamorous tasks of domesticity, who lived in poverty, and who were legally and socially discriminated against. And yet, despite these inequities, they found the strength and moral courage to make claims to their civic freedoms as Americans. When Martin Luther King Jr. took the public stage in December of 1955, I believe he would have told you all that he brought with him the stories of African Americans, just like the ones here in Grand Rapids. I became intrigued about this story because their lives had not been fully documented in the pages of Michigan history. One can never fully understand the larger civil rights struggle without understanding the history of local communities, which is axiomatic to understanding history of human beings everywhere. And here's what I discovered, my friends. I found that our city is a microcosm of our nation. The city of Grand Rapids was chartered in 1850, right when our country was at the great impasse over American slavery. Swirling about through the local dailies were the concerns over the fugitive slave laws. And a political movement commenced around the issues of free labor and free soil. There were also articles about African Americans which depicted them in the light of the popular minstrel shows of the time. And yet again, some articles espoused the right and dignity of all human beings. The country was conflicted, and so were Grand Rapidians. While the majority saw African Americans derogatorily, local African Americans saw themselves very differently. Families like the Hardys, the Mennesees, the Vaughns, and the Joneses, having been freed from slavery in the mid-Atlantic states such as New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, migrated into Michigan with the hopes of building a new life for themselves. Now, just a little historian here. Now, most people think that slavery was only in the South, but it's not true. Slavery was in the mid-Atlantic states, and the first black people to come into Michigan came from those states, having been freed from slavery in 1827. They were independent people, raising families, farming, owning small businesses, and laboring in whatever jobs afforded them an opportunity. They were barbers, horse traders, homemakers, and common laborers. This small community was also politically astute. You see, before the Civil War, laws were enacted to prohibit African Americans from gaining a strong foothold in any of the Northwestern territories, including Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, and Ohio. Though few in number, local African Americans were constantly networking with one another and other communities throughout the state to organize and to petition state legislators to declare that they were full citizens of Michigan. One thing I found amazing in this story is that they continue to perform all the mundane tasks of everyday life, all the while living with the threat of being mistakenly seized by slave catchers, or being kidnapped and sold into slavery. The catastrophic rupture of the American Civil War finally broke the stranglehold that the American South held on the United States, and the institution of slavery collapsed. In the war effort, local African American men took up arms and joined infantry units such as the colored 102nd Division of Michigan. They marched through South Carolina and other battlefronts to destroy slavery's burdensome yoke. This was a great thing for 4 million people held in bondage throughout the South. This was a great thing for African Americans living in small enclaves like Grand Rapids in the North. Ex-slaves and free-born African Americans were both free, in theory, to create independent lives out of the shade of physical bondage. And without hesitation, they created institutions which still exist in our city. Between 1865 and 1890s, African Americans organized churches, put together fraternal and benevolent societies, and entered into political life. As soon as Michigan's legislatures ratified African Americans' right to vote in 1872, William J. Hardy ran for county supervisor from Gaines Township. He was elected to one term, which is, to my knowledge, makes him one of the first African Americans elected to public office in Michigan after the Civil War. Though free from physical bondage, the cultural and racial stigma of slavery continued well after slavery itself was banned. More to the point, racial segregation surfaced once again as a tool to minimize the economic competition between African Americans and fearful white working class and immigrant groups. So although slavery was abolished, the shade of racism still remained in daily cultural practices. As the old Grand Rapids Democratic newspaper byline read, "America is a white man's country." The virulence of American racism did not deter their struggle. African Americans quickly, here in Grand Rapids, allied with white Protestant religious leaders to support them and assist them in making better lives for themselves. This partnership would extend into the South, bringing former slaves into the city and white Grand Rapidians into the South. Alexander Hamilton, not the original Alexander Hamilton, an ex-slave from Tennessee and a veteran, came to the city at the invitation of one of his commanding officers from the Civil War. Hamilton would later study for the bar and become the first African American in Grand Rapids sworn into the practice of law. Just about 5 years after his enslavement, he was practicing law.